Why does a man who spent 22 years trying to get home sit on his back porch every Sunday wishing he was somewhere else? He has the house, the wife, the grandkids' bicycles, the Sunday afternoons, everything he told himself he was fighting for, and something is still pulling at him, and he cannot hand it to anyone across a table. Not because he wants to go back to the danger, not because he wants to go back to the deployments, because he wants to go back to the version of himself that only existed there. I am Robert, Staff Sergeant, 101st Airborne, retired, and today I am giving that pull a name, because naming it is the first thing that changes how it sits. Everyone assumes what he misses is the action, the adrenaline, the missions, and he nods, because correcting them requires explaining something with no civilian equivalent, and that specific exhaustion, he stopped paying in year 2. The real answer is the clarity. Every morning in service, he knew exactly who he was before he opened his eyes. In civilian life, he opens his eyes and has to go looking for himself, and some mornings, he cannot find himself before noon. In service, the answer was in front of him every morning. Clear, specific, consequence-bearing. He never had to build it himself. Service built it. He showed up and executed. In civilian life, he wakes up. The day is empty. The purpose has to come from him. And 22 years of service specifically did not build that skill, because service was the purpose. He was the execution. Psychologists call this identity salience, the degree to which a specific role defines how a person understands themselves. For most people, a job is what they do. For a soldier, service was not what he did. It was what he was. And total is a completely different category from partial. 6 months after the last day in uniform, he was standing at his kitchen counter, coffee in hand, nobody waiting on him, nothing requiring him, and he understood what 22 years had been doing for him every morning. It had been telling him he mattered, and now it wasn't, and he felt optional. Dr. Amy Adler at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research found one consistent result across every population she studied. Identity disruption after discharge is the single most consistent predictor of psychological difficulty in military transition. Not structure, not camaraderie, the identity itself. He sat on the edge of the bed at 5:47, his wife still asleep. He reached for the reason to get up, and his hand closed on empty air. And he sat there, with his hand closed on empty air, for 11 minutes, before he got up anyway. He made coffee, stood at the counter, and realized, for the first time in 22 years, that the day had not come with instructions, and that the feeling that produced was not what he expected. He expected relief. What arrived was vertigo. 5 things, not what he expected to miss. What actually surprised him? At least 3 of these are sitting in your house right now without a name. Number 1. He misses being needed in a way that has real consequences. Not needed like the dishwasher. Needed in a way where his specific capability, on a specific day, was the specific difference. His neighbor called last October. Tree came down on his fence at 7 a.m. Robert was there in 11 minutes. Fixed it. Home by noon. And stood in the driveway for 3 minutes, because he had not felt that specific in 6 months. Not because the fence matters more than his civilian work, because the fence required him at the specific level he was built for, and his civilian work has not once required him at that level. Number 2, he misses the competence, not being good at his job, the specific experience of being extremely good at something most people cannot do, in moments where that was the only thing that mattered. In service, that competence gave him a confidence no civilian credential produces. Not arrogance. The quiet certainty of a man who has been tested in conditions that test everything. In civilian life, he delivers reports. He meets deadlines. But delivering a report on time has never once produced the specific certainty that service produced every single time the margin mattered. Number 3, he misses the structure, not the rules. Not the hierarchy, the experience of waking up with the day already organized by something external, into something purposeful. Manufacturing purpose every morning, when you spent 22 years receiving it fully formed, is the skill service never needed him to build. The civilian world handed him raw materials. Nobody mentioned the builder was not coming. Number 4. He misses the brotherhood, not friendship. The specific quality of men who have been through something together that requires no explanation. Men who knew him before he had to explain himself to anyone in this zip code. He has good friends, men he trusts, men who show up. But with those men, there is always a translation running in the background, always context being provided. With his brothers, the translation never ran once. His brother Marcus called last month. 38 minutes. Robert did not explain a single thing. After he hung up, he sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. Because 38 minutes of no translation takes 11 minutes to come down from. Number 5. This is the one nobody says out loud. He misses being known. Not liked. Not respected. Known. Walking into a room where every man already knew who he was, without him having to earn it one more time from zero. In service, his record was in the room before he was. His capability was already known. He did not have to earn the room. He was already in it before he opened the door. In civilian life, he walks into every room as a stranger. From zero. Every time. And building from zero. In a man who spent 22 years walking into rooms that already knew him, is the exhaustion nobody warned him about. Which one landed hardest right now? The clarity, the competence, the structure, the brotherhood, or being known? Drop it in the comments right now. And the gap between total identity and partial identity is the most invisible distance a retired soldier carries. His wife cannot see it. His neighbors cannot see it. But he feels it. At 2 p.m. on Sundays, at 6:10 on Tuesdays, every time the day arrives without instructions. Here is the psychology underneath all 5. They are not 5 separate things. 5 faces of the same loss. He spent 22 years being a total human being organized around one specific purpose. That organization ended on the last day in uniform. In service, his identity was total. His role, his purpose, his relationships, his structure, his competence, his reputation, all organized around one word. Soldier. Remove that word. Everything becomes unorganized at once. And when that total identity ends on the last day in uniform, the man who walks off the base is not in transition. He is in freefall, and the ceremony did not mention that. The world outside the gate is warm, welcoming, genuinely glad he is home, and it has absolutely no idea what just walked in. His record, not here. His reputation, 0, in every new room for the rest of his life. And nobody at the ceremony mentioned that part. Total identity loss does not heal like a bone. A broken bone heals because the body knows what the bone is supposed to be. Identity does not know what it is supposed to be after service. It has to be told, deliberately, by the man himself. He was handed the watch and the handshake and the parking lot and the rest of his life. And the rest of his life was waiting for him to tell it what shape to take. Nobody told him that either. 3 things. Not a program. Not a workshop. 3 specific things that help a man deliberately rebuild what total identity loss took, starting from where he actually is. First, name the 5 things accurately. Not what you think you should miss. What you actually miss. Because you cannot rebuild what you have not honestly named. Most men in this position are rebuilding without a blueprint, working with raw materials they cannot identify, trying to fill a space whose shape they have never named, and wondering why the effort is not producing the feeling. The answer is always the same. You cannot build what you have not drawn. Second, find the rooms in your civilian life where the 5 things already exist. Not rooms that remind you of service. Rooms that require you, at the level you were actually built for. Robert found his rooms. The neighbor's fence in October required him specifically. His grandson asking how engines work requires him at the level he was built for. The veterans group on the 3rd Thursday. Nothing needs translating. Third, Tell your wife what you are actually missing, not what you think she can handle. The 5 things, one at a time, because she has been trying to help with the wrong thing for 3 years, and she cannot help with what she has never been told. And telling her one true thing changes the back porch at 2 p.m. on Sunday, not because she fixes it, because she stops trying to fix the wrong thing. And a woman who stops fixing the wrong thing and sits with the right thing is the most important person in the deliberate rebuilding. His wife looked at him last Sunday and said, "You have never once told me what you miss." And he sat there for a long time, because she was right. And being right about that cost both of them 3 years. And this time, he answered her. He said, "What I miss most is waking up and knowing exactly who I was before I opened my eyes." And she leaned forward, and he kept going. And when he finished, she said, "I have been trying to give you things to do. I did not understand that what you needed was someone to know what you were carrying." And that sentence landed somewhere Robert did not know was empty. And the back porch at 2 p.m. on Sunday was never the same after that. Not because she fixed it, because she knew what it was. Why does a man who spent 22 years trying to get home sit on his back porch every Sunday wishing he was somewhere else? Because the man who wanted to come home and the man who got here are 2 different men. One left himself at the gate, and bringing that version of himself home takes longer than the drive, and it requires deliberate effort, and it does not happen on its own, and nobody told him. The version of himself that existed in service did not disappear when the uniform came off. It is still there. He just has not known what he was looking for. Now he does. The clarity, already in the neighbor's fence. The competence, already in his grandson asking how engines work. The brotherhood, already in 38 minutes with Marcus. The structure, already in the veterans group on Thursday. Being known, already in his wife on the back porch. These are not consolation prizes. The fence is not a consolation prize for the mission. His grandson is not a consolation prize for the unit. They are the deliberate rebuilding, already in progress. The deliberate rebuilding begins with naming the most expensive feeling in the military transition vocabulary. Not grief, not anger, not loneliness. Optional. Because a man built to be specifically necessary, in moments where specifically necessary was the only thing that mattered, should never stand at his kitchen counter at 6:10 and feel like the day would have arrived exactly the same way without him. And the deliberate rebuilding does not look like service. It is not supposed to. 11 minutes at a neighbor's fence. 38 minutes with Marcus, a grandson who actually listens. A wife who stayed on the back porch until the afternoon got cold. Share this right now with one retired soldier, or one person who loves a retired soldier, who has been sitting on the back porch at 2 p.m. on Sundays, wondering why. This is the why. Not because this video fixes the identity loss, because naming is the beginning of the blueprint, and the blueprint is the beginning of the deliberate rebuilding, and the deliberate rebuilding is the only rebuilding that works. The neighbor's fence was October. 11 minutes. Robert felt more like himself in 11 minutes at a fence than in 6 months of being fine, and that told him exactly where the first beam needed to go. Not the same reason as service. A different reason, built deliberately from the same 5 materials, by a man who finally has the blueprint. And a man with a blueprint, in a life that has the raw materials, is not missing something. He is building something. If you are the family member watching this, she asked him what he actually misses. And she sat on that back porch for 47 minutes. And she said, what you needed was someone to know what you were carrying. You can do that today, because what he needed was not a project or a hobby or a suggestion. What he needed was someone who could hold the 5 things accurately. And holding accurately is the most specific help available. He came home. He has the house, the wife, the grandkids' bicycles, the Sunday afternoons. Everything he told himself he was building toward for 22 years, from every deployment. All of it here. And now, for the first time, he is here in it too. Not just present. Here. The 2 things together, The life he came home for and the version of himself that existed in service are the life he actually came home for, and he is building it, one beam at a time. He stood at the kitchen counter at 6:10 6 months after his last day in uniform and felt optional. And now, 3 years later, he stands at the same counter at 6:10 and feels specifically required by something he built. Name the 5 things accurately. Find the rooms where they already exist. Tell your wife what you are actually missing. Start the deliberate rebuilding today, because ready comes after starting, not before it. The raw materials for the deliberate rebuilding were always already in his civilian life. The fence. His grandson. Marcus. The third Thursday. His wife. He just needed the blueprint to see them. And the answer was never go back. It was always bring it forward. The clarity forward. The competence forward. The brotherhood forward. The structure forward. Being known forward. Into the life that is already here. He was always allowed to bring it with him. The version of himself that existed in service was always allowed to come home. He just needed the 5 names. And now, so do you. Why does a man who spent 22 years trying to get home sit on his back porch every Sunday wishing he was somewhere else? Because he came home, but he left himself at the gate, and he did not know he was allowed to bring himself home too. He is everything he came home for. The house, the wife, the grandkids' bicycles, the Sunday afternoons. And now, for the first time, he has himself too. In this life, building. The optional feeling is the most expensive feeling in the military transition vocabulary. And replacing it, one fence, one grandson, one Marcus, one Thursday, one back porch at a time, is the deliberate rebuilding. His wife sat on the back porch for 47 minutes, and she said, what you needed was someone to know what you were carrying. And that sentence was the being known, starting to be rebuilt. And 3 weeks later, she walked out to the back porch at 2 p.m. on Sunday and just sat down beside him, without being asked, because she knew what he was carrying. And that changed everything about 2 p.m. on Sunday. Not go back. Bring it forward. Say it out loud. Write it down. Find the rooms. Tell your wife. Because the answer was always already here. You just needed the blueprint to see it. He stood at the kitchen counter on an ordinary Tuesday 6 months after his last day in uniform and felt optional. And naming it accurately was the beginning of replacing it. He called Marcus on a Thursday, not because it was Veterans Day, not because something happened, just because Thursday is when the reason to call does not need a reason. And Marcus picked up on the second ring. The deliberate rebuilding is already in progress. The fence happened in October. Marcus happened last month. His grandson asked about engines last Saturday. The veterans group meets Thursday. His wife is beside him on the back porch. The man who knows what he is building and why and where the next beam goes is not the same man who stood at the kitchen counter at 6:10 on an ordinary Tuesday reaching for something that was not there. He is not finished. He is building, and building is everything. He was always allowed to bring it with him. Always. He just needed the 5 names. The clarity, the competence, the structure, the brotherhood, being known. And now, so do you. Why does a man who spent 22 years trying to get home sit on his back porch every Sunday wishing he was somewhere else? The answer is 5 words. He left himself at the gate. And bringing himself home starts with the 5 names. And the 5 names start with honesty. And honesty starts right now, while you are still watching this. The neighbor's fence was October. One morning, 11 minutes. And Robert felt more like himself than he had felt in 6 months. One room. That is all it takes to start. And 38 minutes with Marcus, where nothing needed translating, was one more room. And his grandson asking how engines work is one more room. Rooms do not have to be large. They have to be real. And his wife on the back porch for 47 minutes, saying what you needed was someone to know what you were carrying, was being known, starting to be rebuilt, right there on the back porch. For rooms, one fence, one phone call, one grandson, one back porch, and the optional feeling is already getting quieter and specifically required. is already getting louder. Not go back. Bring it forward. The answer was always here. The 5 names were always available. The rooms were always in his civilian life. He just needed the blueprint. And now he has it. He is everything he came home for. And now he has himself too. And the 2 things together are the life he actually came home for. And he is in it. Right now. Building. Share this right now with one retired soldier, or one person who loves a retired soldier, who has been sitting on the back porch at 2 p.m. on Sundays, wondering why. This is the why. And after you share it, name the 5 things. Find the rooms. Tell your wife what you are actually missing. Because the answer was never go back. It was always bring it forward. And the forward starts today.